Good morning. Today we are going to make an app that displays reminders on the screen in a list. It allows user to enter the items into the list, and then it will allow them to scroll through and look back at the reminders they've put in the list. We have 45 minutes. It is 8 o'clock. I have 45 minutes until class starts. Let's see if I can get this whole thing done in one video, start to finish, in 45 minutes before you get to class. This way, you can possibly use my example to help you with doing this yourself and learn along with me. So when you click on the code.org link, you will go into the workspace, but there's also a copy of the activity guide, which I highly recommend you open up and maybe keep in a tab so that you can refer back to it, because it does have interesting information like the picture of the app on the screen with the names of the user input elements on them. I actually have mine up on a tab on my other screen that I can refer to while I do this video. It might be a good thing for you to look through the activity guide and try to get yourself to answer these questions before you complete this lesson. I have already done that. I'm going to just dive in. So the first thing they recommend in the activity guide is basically create all our variables. So in the workspace, I know that I'm going to need, this is variables. I'll put creating variables. And in fact, I think I'm going to just lay out my whole code with comments to kind of organize myself and show what I'm about to do. The next thing after that is basically I would need event handlers. And then at the bottom, I might need functions. Remember, this is kind of the standard organization of a program. Function might be update screen, something like that. I may switch between blocks and code mode. I like to stay in code mode typing, but I will sometimes drag some of the blocks over just for simplicity. So the variables that I'm going to need, first of all, I need a list, and I'm going to call it reminder list. And now in order to indicate that this is a list, I need the square brackets, and I'm going to start with an empty list. So I'm not putting anything in the square brackets, but I always have a semicolon at the end. Then I'm going to need an index to keep track of where we are currently in the list. So I'm just going to call that index. I'm going to set it to 0 because anytime you have a list, the first index is going to be 0. So I might as well initialize that. Okay. What I'm going to do next is follow the steps that were in the activity guide. It says after you create your variables and give them starting values, then create a function that updates the screen. So I'm going to go to functions and I'm going to grab the function definition block, but what that does is just set me up with the syntax required. Now I actually have to give my function a name. This function is going to be the familiar update screen function. Now, what should the update screen function do? I am once again referring back to the list scrolling pattern that they mentioned in the activity guide. And basically, the update screen function is going to put the current reminder on the screen, and it's going to put the index in the middle in this little count output. So there are two things to update when the screen needs to be updated. The first one, to put something in this output box. If you go into design mode, you see that this output box is like a text display, text area, I believe. So the thing, we're going to want to basically update this text area with the current item in the list. So I'm going to use the function set property. I have to indicate which ID I want to set the property of, and the name of this thing is reminder output. Okay, which property of this do I want to set? I want to set the text property. And what do I want to set it to? Now this is complicated because right now there's nothing in the list, but I have to keep in mind at some point there will be things in the list, and the current item is what I want to display in that text area. So I'm going to use the name of the list, reminder list, and then in the square brackets to indicate which element, I'm just going to put index, the current index, wherever we are. Then I also want to make sure I update the current index here. If the index has just changed by clicking on one of these buttons, then I want to now display a new number in that box. The name of that space is count output. I believe it's a label. So I'm going to set the property of count output. Which property do I want to set? I believe it's going to be text again. Let's see. I'm going to go into design mode just to be safe and check what thing. Yep, text. Text is what I want to set. And what do I want to set it to? I want to set it to index. Now, so far, there is nothing in the list. Maybe I'll start off with a quick little list just to test out what I've done so far. What kind of things could we remind ourselves of? For me, the teacher, I need to, finalize grades. I need to, comma. The next item would be, plan lessons, comma, and then make video. Okay, so I've got 3 things in the list. The current index is 0, so that would mean that the current thing to be displayed is the first one. Now, in order to test out my update screen method, I want to put a function call, which means tell that method to do its job, call it into action. So by name, update screen function is getting called to kind of just start off the program and make sure something happens when I run it. All right. So when I run this, hey, look at that. It updates the screen by showing the first item in the list. And it does say 0 as the first index. Okay. Now, what I need to do next is basically give the user 3 different things they can do. They can click on the 2 left or right arrow buttons, or they can type into this box and click on the add button. So I'm going to need 3 event handlers, 1 for each of these buttons. Let me start with on event. I do like to drag the on event block out because the bracketing situation is pretty tricky, but I will do the rest in typing. So let's start by handling the right arrow. Okay. When the user clicks on what's the name of that object? Let me go to it's called right button. When they click on it, what we would like to do is increase the index as long as we are not currently too far in the list. Okay, so let's see. Basically, we'd like to do index plus plus, but we have to protect that. We can't make the index go too far. If the list only has 3 items, we can't try to we can't try to access a 4th item. So remember that the length of the list -1 is the highest index. So we're going to put a little protection around this incrementing of the index. We're going to say we're only going to increment the index and go further if the index is less than reminder list dot length -1. If it's even equal to reminder list dot length -1, then we are at the end and we would not want to increase the index any further. Okay, so here's my protection to make sure I don't try to run off the end of the list. It's this condition to check that the index is still less than reminder list dot length -1. And after I have added 1 to the index because they clicked on the right button, so that means they're indicating they want to see the next item to the right, which has a higher index, then I'm going to update the screen, which means I just call the update screen function to do its job. All right, I think this looks good. I'm going to try running, reset, run the program, and just test out my right button. Right, right, right. And if I keep clicking, nothing happens because I'm at the end of the list. So that looks good. Now the left button still doesn't do anything. I can't seem to get back and see those earlier values. So that's the next thing. I'm going to add an event handler for the left button. And it just so happens that is called left button. Very convenient. Okay, this time I want to protect myself. We don't want the user to be able to go too far down to the bottom of the list, like the beginning of the list. We can't go past the first item in the list. So this time we're going to check and make sure that if they are trying to go backwards in the list, they don't go anywhere below 0. So as long as index is still greater than 0, if it's at 0, we won't go any further. We're not going to do this. But if they are still within the list in a valid range at the given point when they click this button, then we are going to decrement the index or take away 1 from the index because they have indicated they want to go to the left or closer to the beginning of the list. So the index would decrease by 1. That's what the minus minus means. And then once we've changed the index, we're going to update the screen. Okay, now let's test that out. Does the left button work now? Well, in order to test the left button, we could start by clicking it, but nothing happens, and that's good because we're at the current beginning of the list. There's nothing down there to click to. But let's try going forward 2 clicks to the end of the list. And now if we use the left button, we can go back. It's working. All right. The last thing to give them functionality for is the add button. When a user clicks on the add button, and I'm assuming that's called add button. Let me just check. Yes, it is. Very good, descriptive, meaningful name. Add button. If the user clicks on the add button, what we need to do is go retrieve what they have typed into this box, which is called reminder input, and we need to take that and add it to the list. And I think we're just going to add it to the list at the end of the list. Okay, we're going to append their new reminder to the end of the list. So the first thing to do is create a variable to, whoops, I have to type in my code area here. Create a variable to store whatever comes from the reminder input box, just temporarily. Actually, you know what? We don't even need to do that. We could just do this all in one shot. We could say we want to append an item to the reminder list. Now, what item do we want to append? We want to append whatever comes from getting the text from the reminder input. So we're actually using the output of this function, getText, to become the input to this function. And you can do that all in one step. And the append item function will take care of adding an extra slot to the list and placing this value into that slot and basically numbering it with its own new index. Okay, so let's try and run this and see what happens if we type one last thing into the box. Let's see, what might I have to do today? Go to department meeting. And I click add. Now, you may not see anything on the screen. Oh, that's because I didn't update the list. I didn't update the screen. But let me try clicking on right, right, right. Oh, there it is. It's at the end. Okay. Now, what I just learned is that it would probably feel good for the user after they click after they type in their new item and they click add, it would probably be good to show that on the screen. So let's do update screen after they have added something to the list. And in fact, we may have to at this point, well, let's just see what happens if we just update screen. So running it again, department meeting, add. Okay, it did not go to the end of the list. So if we wanted to basically go and show that on the screen, we have to increment the index, place the index at the end. So I'm gonna say this: index gets. I'm gonna update it to be whatever's the last item in the list, so that they see this new item going in there. Okay, so reminder list dot length -1. So we're gonna basically, I'm gonna put a comment here that says, show the user their new last item. This is always the index of the last item in the list. List.length -1. Whatever the name of the list is, dot length, that's too far beyond, but -1 is the last index. All right, so let's run it. Now if I do math department meeting, add, it took me there and it updated my index, so I can go back through the list and it looks like I'm good. I think this is the basic, all we need to make the app work. I am going to go back into level 2 and just double check, did I do it correctly? Is that how it functions the way that they had it running? So here is the sample app back in level 2. It says add reminders. Oh, I forgot to put that prompt on the screen, so that's one thing I should do. Now, it has nothing in it, so if I put in my reminders, grade papers, add, okay, plan lessons, add, and then what else did I have? Oh, I forget. Write letters of, how about this? Check email. That's a nice easy one. If I could just spell email. Okay, now when I look through the list, I've got 3 things. Oh, and they are actually starting the index at 1 on the screen. So that's something I should adjust. Okay. I'm noticing all these little things that are different than the way I did it. Now, when let's say that I'm at the first item and I add something new, math department meeting. If I add this, is it going to be appended to the end or is it going to go right in here after grade papers? Let's see. I add that. It does not show up on the screen, but it is at the end. Okay, so I'm good that the append is what I want. The only things I'm going to change are at the beginning. It actually shows a little prompt on the screen, add items, and then this number here should be should show 1 more than it actually is as an index. All right, so let me go back to my copy in level 3. Okay. And when I first create the reminder list, instead of, let's see, I'm just going to set the property just for the very first beginning of the list, set the property of the let's see, what's it called? What's this called? Reminder output. I'm going to set the text to say enter reminders. That's the little prompt that'll show up on the screen just at the beginning. Remember, the top of the program is where it starts running. So after declaring variables, it'll just automatically set that up here in the text area. And then updating the screen, oh, then it's going to immediately replace it with whatever's the first thing. So I'm going to start my reminder list with empty, just the way it does in the sample app. And then when I update the screen, instead of actually showing the actual index, I am going to show index +1 because that's what makes more sense to the user looking at it. Rather than seeing 0 as the first item, now they're going to see the number 1 displayed here, and always one more than the actual index variable contains. It just will look nicer. So let's see. Enter reminders. Okay, I am getting a little warning that I did something. Line 38, set property value parameter undefined is not a user UI string. Oh, okay, so, but it is displaying a 1, even though index is currently 0. So it seems to be working. Oh, maybe this reminder output. Oh, because there is nothing in the list. It's having a hard time. Maybe I should just protect this here. If the reminder list dot length is greater than 0, we will display something on the screen. Otherwise, we won't worry about that. Okay, so let's try running this. Now I have no more warning because I protected it from trying to print out something when there is nothing in the list yet. Okay, so let's see. I can't go forward or back yet. It's actually running this code, but there's nothing there. So it's catching, it's basically this if statement is not true, so it's not incrementing the index, and then the update screen is nothing's happening. All right, if I add a new reminder, grade papers. Now it goes to that one and it shows that's the first thing in the list. What if I put plan lessons? That's number 2, and I can go back to 1. I can scroll to 2. Seems to be working. And then let's say we do check email. That's a third thing, and I can scroll back through the list. I think it's good. This is really all you need, and it took me 23 minutes. So hopefully this has been helpful and informative, and you've learned something. But there are, in the activity guide, there are some things, extra kind of extension ideas. You could make it so that there's a delete button. They left space on the bottom of the screen where you could actually put a delete button so that the current item gets deleted from the list. That would be like if you have time and you just want to make it better. Also, you could do that thing where you allow it to scroll and wrap around to keep going back through the list or forward through the list starting at the beginning. Like if you get to the end, wrap back around, go to the beginning. We did that in one of the lessons earlier today, this unit. You could implement that as well. Okay, so this is my solution, and I need to see that you have also implemented this in your lesson 4 of Unit 5, code.org. And when you've done that, good job. And I'll talk to you next time.